Hello everyone! Welcome back to Crafts with Crashly. This tutorial Tuesday is going to be kind of interesting. I'm going to show you how I made my flower canes with polymer clay. So first I'm going to start out with the rose cane. And to do the rose cane, I'm using all Premo in these tutorials, by the way. I'm showing you 3 different flowers. Yeah, so for the rose cane, I have a darker red and a medium red, and then this is a sparkle white. Now the white looks like it might be tinted a little bit, and it's only because I conditioned the two red clays with my hands and then, you know, touched the white. Which is okay because we're gonna do a Skinner blend anyway, so I don't really care if it's tinted. But for this Skinner blend, I'm just doing the teardrop Skinner blend. And if you don't know what the teardrop Skinner blend is, I do have a video on my channel that is titled Intro to Skinner Blends. But the teardrop Skinner blend is basically where you take however much of each color that you want in your blend, shape them like a teardrop, and like I'm doing here, kind of push them together. Then I'm going to take my roller here, and I'm just flattening it out, you know, kind of just so I can put it in the pasta machine. Yeah, I got a big old air bubble right there in that middle color. But that's okay, because I'm about to put it in the pasta machine, so I'm not too concerned about it. So I'm going to put it in long ways, just so when you insert it in the pasta machine, all the colors are facing down. That's very important. So the basics of the Skinner blend is to continue folding where all the colors are touching. You keep running it through over and over and over again until it gets to the blend that you're going for. And I usually start out with a thicker setting, and then once it kind of gets moving, I'll go down in settings to, you know, push it through at a thinner setting, but just making sure I'm folding and putting it through the pasta machine the same way every single time. All the colors should be touching. So I have my blend here, and then I made it into a very long piece, which again I could show you how to in my Intro to Skinner blend tutorial. And now I'm just doing an accordion fold with that long Skinner blend, which is just like you see here, going back and forth on each end. And again, this is for the rose. And the rose, you basically just work each petal at a time, but after the blend is how you want to, you just do the accordion fold back and forth, and every time I fold it, I'm kind of pressing down in the middle out just to make sure I don't get any air trapped in. And if your long piece of Skinner blend ends up being uneven, where you have some going over the edges, I just kind of, you know, push it back together to try to make it as even as possible, just because I want an even spread of each color. So that's what I'm doing here. Alright, once I'm done, I have my nice little brick here, but this is for the actual petals of the rose, so I'm rounding off those corners to make it more of a round shape, and then now I'm reducing it to make it longer, just making sure I keep it nice and round, because I don't want the actual square look, because petals are round. And this is the darker of the reds. I just put that out on a pretty thin setting on my pasta machine. I believe it was the second to thinnest. And for whatever reason, this red that I got kept getting really oily, so that's why it's shiny. Yeah, see, it got on my hands there. Ugh. But I'm just gonna wrap the whole thing in that darker red, the one that ended the Skinner blend. So I'm just wrapping the whole thing here after I cut it to size. Pretty, pretty. And now I'm just going to reduce it because I'm going to be cutting it for each petal. And I'm sorry if this one seems like it's jumping around more than the others. It's only because I wanted to stay within my hour-long video. So I kind of sped up the entire thing pretty much just so I could fit everything in. So that's probably why you're going to hear me talk more. So I'm reducing this down to 6 inches. That's why I'm counting here. Each one of my squares are 6. And then I'm just going to start at one end. I did a little bit more, that's what I did. I'm just going to cut even three pieces off, right? Just 3 of the same size. And oh yeah, I did a little bit more because I knew I'd have waste on the end, which you always do when you reduce. So now I have 3 even petals, and I'm going to reduce it back to 6 inches again. So naturally, after I cut the 3 pieces off and reduce it again, my 6-inch snake is going to be thinner. So I'm going to reduce it to 6, and then I'm going to cut 3 more pieces off. And these 3 pieces will be smaller than the first 3, right? And I'm just going to repeat that process once more. So I should have 3 different sizes of petals. So I'm just still reducing it, and I'm not quite going to 6 inches here because I don't want my smallest petals to be too tiny. Yeah, that looked like the right shape there, or size. And now for this end piece, we still want to keep that. This is going to be the very center of our rose. And I'm using my thumb and I'm just kind of pressing down to make the side with the white down into a point. I'm just using my thumb and I'm just pressing down flat. And I got this little roller here to kind of make it come to more of a spiral. Not the whole thing, you know, just the little tip where the white is. Because then I'm going to be able to roll it and make this kind of spiral for the center of the rose. After I flatten it, I'm just taking my finger, I'm lightly pressing, sorry that my camera's shaking, but I'm just rolling it, starting at that thin end, and I'm rolling it up to the thick part, which is, like I said, going to create a kind of spiral that you see in the center of roses. And don't worry about that white peeking through there, it's okay, it's just the center of a flower anyway. That's the beauty of flowers, none of them are the exact same, none of them are perfect. And see how using or flattening that white part out and rolling it created this kind of spiral. And now I'm just rolling it to kind of get it to wrap around as much as I can, and then trimming off the end so I can see how it came out. Just a nice little spiral there. So now I'm taking each piece and I'm pushing with my pointer fingers and my thumbs just on the edges to make this kind of weird shape here where the sides are flat. And I want to make sure I have white on the bottom or top and red on the other half. I don't want them going, you know, the other way. I want the white to stay on the bottom and the red to be on the top. And I'm going to do that same exact shape for all of these petals here. And you'll notice here how when I start with one end and I make, you know, push with my pointer finger, my thumb, I immediately flip it over and do that end before going down in the middle. And it's just because sometimes when you reduce, it kind of twists a little bit. And I want to make sure I have the white on the bottom and the red on the top on both sides. So I'll pinch one end, flip it over. See, this one was twisted. And I'll pinch that end and then go down the center. And that way you make sure it's even throughout your petal. After I shaped each petal, I'm going to take my centerpiece again here, starting with the smallest petals. I'm going to wrap it around that centerpiece, and I'm always making sure my white is facing out, and I'm overlapping the next petal with the previous petal I put on, and just trying to make sure it's straight all the way down just so it looks semi-uniform for my cane. So I'm basically just continually wrapping, I'm using up all the smaller petals first, always making sure my white is out, and then I'm going to move up to the medium and then the large ones and just keep overlapping and wrapping them around. Now I'm going to take more of that darker red and I'm going to put it through my pasta machine. I believe I did this at the third to lowest setting, just a nice thin piece of the darker red, and I'm going to wrap the whole thing in this just so it has a nice dark outline for the whole rose cane. I did put an extra layer of this on the dips of the petals just because I'm doing mine as a round cane. Now I have seen some people leave the wavy ends and reduce it that way, but for me I use my flowers for pens, so I'm okay with having it a nice circle. So where it was wavy, I put an extra small layer of this red, and then I just wrapped the whole thing with one solid sheet just to make sure my petals actually stay intact. Like I said, the red that I was using got really oily. That's why I have to use actual clay to clean off my little surface here. And now I'm squeezing it in the middle out, which is super important with canes because air can very often get trapped in the middle, and if you have air bubbles then you'll get distortion, and it's just bad news bears. So I'm squeezing from the middle and I'm going to start reducing. Now to reduce, it was nice and warm already, so I started rolling, but then I would stop and pull, just because that, like I said, that red kept getting warm and oily, so I'm just pulling and then I'm rolling until I get it to the size that I'm wanting. And I stopped while it was big just to see what it was turning out as, and it came out really pretty. The next flower I'm going to show you is more of like a petal cane that we're going to be creating at first. And of course for this you can use whatever colors you want. I decided to use like a pink and different shades of blue, just so I could show you how I'm going to make these colors go throughout the petal easily. So you're going to start out with your lightest color. I chose white, and you're going to make it into a log and then shape it as a triangle. And then your very first color, I like to do like my second to lightest color. You're going to flatten that out to a pretty thin setting. I did the third to thinnest. And you're going to cut it to size of that triangular log that you created, and you're going to kind of drape it over the top of your triangle. And after you drape it over the triangle part, like the point, you're going to reduce it. I'll show you how that goes. But when you drape it over, don't go all the way down to the edge. Just leave a little bit of the white or whatever light color you're using. So not quite the whole top of the triangle. And you're going to keep that triangle shape, and we're going to reduce. And I believe I reduced to about 4 or 5 inches or so. You know, not too much, it just really depends on preference. Just kidding, it was about 3 inches. And then we're going to cut it in half, and then we're going to stick the two top parts together, and make sure you're pushing on the inside. And we're going to lay it flat on our work surface, and those 2 points, we're going to smush them down to make a triangle again. Okay, so now you have like that pink stripe in the middle there. I'm going to reduce it the same way, keeping my triangular shape. Now it looks like about 3.5 inches again. Cut it right down in the middle. Now we have 2 lines on 2. Do the same thing, stick it together like a diamond. Make sure you push from the middle. Stick it flat and push it down into the triangular shape. And we're just going to repeat this until we get a nice flow of color throughout the triangle. Once you're satisfied with the first color, you can move on to the next one. For me, that was my light blue. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the pink and the white. I'm going to roll it out to a thin setting. Yeah, it's my glitter blue. And I'm going to trim it to size of the log, and then drape it over exactly how I did with the pink. And we're basically repeating the process after we drape it over, not all the top. Leave a little bit of space there. I'm going to reduce, cut in half, reduce, cut in half, just repeating the same process we just did. Now you can stop with 2 colors if you want to. I decided to do another shade of blue. It's a darker blue, it's more like a navy. So I'm doing just 1 more color here. You're welcome to stop or do however many colors you want. Just keep in mind this is the petal portion. So I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm gonna apply it, trim off the end there, reduce it, cut in half, put it together until you're happy with the blend. Once you're happy with the blend, we're going to leave it in this diamond shape, and we're going to just kind of smush it together almost, just lightly at first, just because with the petal, you know, it's more rounded instead of those pointy parts. So I'm just kind of rounding off those pointy sides there, and I'm kind of just shaping it into the shape of a petal. Once I have the shape that I like, I'm going to reduce the whole thing enough to where I can get 5 even pieces. I like the flowers to have 5 petals, so we're going to be cutting it into 5 even pieces and then assembling it as a cane. Alright, and you notice while I was reducing it, I tried to keep that same petal shape, you know, round at the top to a point. I just love how this one turned out. It's so different. And I like my flowers to have a center, like the center of the flower. Some people I've noticed like to flatten them and kind of just smush them all together. I like having a little color in the middle, so I took each petal and I kind of flattened the bottom so they didn't come to such a point. That way when I smush them together against my yellow center, they kind of come better together, which makes it blend to where you can still see the actual roundness of each individual petal, but they're close together. I don't like that giant gap in between the petals. I don't know. That's just my preference. You can keep them pointy if you want to. I just like mine to come closer together. That's all. That's why I flattened the bottoms. And now I am just wrapping each petal around my center yellow part, and like you saw what I did there, you may have to reshape the petals if you notice like one's much bigger or much smaller than the next. just to make sure they fit evenly together like that. And you'll have one end more than likely that's uneven, and that's okay because you can just trim it up. I love how this flower turned out. I do. So you can just trim that end up, and now it's more even. So you want to press them against the middle just so they don't fall off, but not too much. Because next step is we're going to take our background and put it in between the petals and all around to make it into a cane. Now for this, thanks to Mindy, Mom, pushing me to do this, I found the trick of using translucent as the background. That way when you add the flowers to things, you don't have a colored background. Translucent is kind of clear, which allows you to overlap flowers and things like that. Now I found that I liked the Premo white translucent for this more than I liked the regular plain translucent. I just found that the regular translucent after baked turned a brown shade and the white stayed clear. So you'll see how I'm taking these and making them into kind of a point, almost like a triangle, and that's just so I have it dip in between each petal, so when I reduce, it's not just, you know, a big circle of, you know, a weird petal with one, I don't know, it looks like one mega petal instead of each individual ones. So having it come to a point will keep those petals separate on, you know, the outside. After I put these triangles in between each petals, I'm going to wrap the whole thing in one layer of the translucent. Pretty thick setting. I think I used my third to largest one to wrap it at the end. Now I went ahead and I trimmed off a tiny little bit after putting the translucent in between the petals, just so I can show you what it looks like just with having the translucent in between each petal. So I'm going to show you this before I completely wrap the outside. So here's what it looks like with the outside wrapped. Now I'm just going to reduce my cane here. I'm just going to reduce it to whatever size I want, whether you want to keep the flowers big or you want it small, doesn't really matter. Just remember to start smushing from the middle out, and then you can roll. Just take breaks and, you know, push and pull. Take your time with this part so you don't get distortion. And now I'm going to cut into it, I believe. Yes. I'm cutting the ends because there's a lot of wastage on the end. There you go. And that's how this one turned out. I think this is one of the my favorite flowers that I made. I'm going to cut a couple little pieces here so you can see each individual one. And now we are on to the third and final flower, which was by far the hardest of the three. I asked my good pal Jennifer what her favorite flower was, and she said it was a sunflower. And I kind of started from scratch with this. I started with the center of a sunflower. So I have like this golden brown back there and a really dark brown. So what I'm gonna do is that the golden brown, I just made it into a round log, and I am going to put the dark brown through my pasta machine on a thick setting. It was the second to largest, and I'm gonna wrap this log in the dark brown. Then after it's wrapped, I'm going to reduce it, and then I will cut it into different sections, combine them, and reduce. I'll show you. Okay, so I'm cutting them into 3 pieces to start with. They don't have to be even, it doesn't matter for what we're doing. I'm just kind of smushing them together in whatever order, and then I'm just reducing again. So I'm going to also cut it another time and then recombine them. So what this will do is kind of make a spotted center, which I figured for some flowers that's what the middle looks like typically, right? It's got sunflower seeds up in there. So each individual one of these rounds already has 3 of those golden dots. So I'm just kind of sticking them together. I'm going to try to keep it as round as possible. I'm going to do the same thing. Smush them all together and then roll them out and reduce. So it basically just multiplies the center. And I already had a lot, so this time I cut just in 4s. But this time I'm not going to reduce. I was pretty happy with how the center looked. So I'm kind of smushing them together, and I'm still going to make it into a round shape. So I'm still going to roll it because this is going to be the center of my sunflower cane. Now I'm taking that dark brown again, and I'm just going to wrap the entire center in that dark brown to give it a dark border for the middle of the flower. So now I'm going to start with the actual sunflower petals. To do this, I have 2 shades of yellow here. I have a darker yellow, a lighter yellow, and I have a copper brown. And what I did was I created 2 separate Skinner blends. One of the Skinner blend was with both of the shades of yellow and the copper, and the other one was just the shades of yellow. And then I combined them all to create the flower, and it just gave it some more depth. and detail to each individual petal. And again, I'm not going to show you the whole Skinner blend process just because I already have a video out on basics of Skinner blends. So you're going to see a jump here. I'm going to show you one fold and then it's going to jump. Bam! And now I'm just going to roll it out and make it long. So I just cut it into sections, even sections to make it longer, and then I'm going to put it back through the same setting of my pasta machine with the brown side down first, and that's going to give us a long strip. Now I'm going to do that accordion fold again, doing it nice and thin, taking my time, making sure I don't have any air bubbles in the middle. That way I have the darker color at the bottom and then the lighter one on the top. And this one got kind of uneven, so I'm kind of just smushing it back together. So now, oh, I did add a darker shade of yellow. I added a third shade. And I got that darker shade in this one here just by mixing the medium yellow with a tiny bit of brown. I just thought it needed more depth. That's right, I remember. So now I'm reducing this yellow one, with the one with the more yellow, down so I can cut it into little pieces and assemble my petal. And you'll notice that there's much more of the one with more yellow in it, just because that's going to be my main petal color scheme. The other one is just adding depth and kind of some shadowing to the petal. So I'm going to cut these into strips and piece them together. I'm just putting less of the smaller one there and more of the main color block within the petal. Now I did focus on leaving the dark brown pieces towards what I was going to make the bottom of the petal. That way the whole thing kind of had more of a fade from dark to a light yellow, and I just loved the appearance that gave. Once I was done adding the dark brown within there, I just took another little piece of the lightest yellow and I'm going to wrap the top part with it. Just because, like I've said, I was going for a look that had the bottom of the petal dark going into light. So I just added more of that, like I said, the lightest yellow just to the very top of the petal. Now I'm just going to pinch the top part to make that come to a point, just like in a normal sunflower. Making sure the bottom is staying slightly roundish with a flat, very bottom, and then the top is still coming to a point. And here's how it turns out so far. I absolutely love the way this looks. It's seeing how taking the pieces of the Skinner blend and assembling it allows you to put some depth in the middle. I just absolutely love it. So now I'm taking the whole thing and I'm going to reduce it quite a bit, because as we know, sunflowers have quite a few petals. And I'm just doing this carefully. Like I said, I'm still trying to maintain that same petal shape I was going for, just while pulling and flipping and pulling and making sure that shape is still there. So this definitely, if you do this at home, folks, just make sure you take your time so you don't lose that petal detail in the middle. It does take some time, just because you got to keep maintaining the shape, pinching, and then rolling the bottom while you pull. So take your time with reducing. It's an art. And now I trimmed a little bit off just to make sure I was maintaining the center with all that detail that I wanted. And it looks like everything's still there. And I reduced it down quite a bit, as you can see. And I have two of the reduced strips here of the same thing. And I'm just going to kind of line them up next to each other. And then I'm going to cut at 1 inch just to get as many petals as I possibly can. And yeah, I got this one shorter than the other one, so I'm just reducing this one a little bit more. Yeah, and then I'm going to cut at 1 inch to assemble the flower. Now I'm going to get that center again, and I'm going to be attaching each petal to the center that we made earlier, and just trying to make sure it's the same length as most of my petals. Looks like my petals were a bit larger, so I wanted my center to be smaller. Just trying to see if that looked better. Yep, looked more proportioned after I made the center a little bit smaller. Sorry, I was trying to get my camera to focus. There it goes. But yeah, that looked way better than it began. And now I'm just going to make sure my center is the right length. So I just put it up next to a petal and making the petals a little bit skinnier. Just because, like I said, I wanted to fit as many petals as I possibly could. Just because sunflowers have a lot of petals, eh? Then I slightly pressed on there. I'm just trimming the ends just to make sure I'm going to have as much cane as possible. So then we're just going to be assembling the actual flower just by pressing each petal against the center. And most of the petals I did have to reshape a little bit to make them a little bit skinnier, which is what you have to do quite often when you're assembling flower canes with petals. You just may have to reshape them a little bit, so making them a little bit more thin. And then, like I said, just continuing all around the center. Now, just like before, I have my white translucent, and I do have it shaped like a triangle. I'm going to put this in between each petal, because again, when I reduce, I want to make sure the petals stay separated, especially with the sunflower with it having such longer petals. So I'm just cutting same width as my actual flower, and just like before, I'm going to put the translucent in between and then wrap the entire thing once I'm done with that. Now I kind of jumped ahead on you. So see, it looks like a little squishy blob. Squishy blob flower. Aww. And we're going to reduce it the same kind of way. This one I was extra super careful because there's a lot of those long petals in there, and I really didn't want to lose them during the reducing. So I'm squeezing the center out, just making sure all the clay in the middle is still nice and warm and easy to manipulate. And I'm slightly pulling and rolling, and this took me quite a while because it is a bigger cane. So yeah, this is just the reducing part. My favorite! Now this is the moment of truth. Dun dun Dun, 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 dun. Absolutely beautiful. Each individual petal stayed there. And again, you can completely see here why having those triangles of translucent in between is so important. If you did a misshape, those petals would have just came together. So that is like one of the most important parts about making these flower canes for sure. So I left one half big and I'm just reducing the other half a little bit further just so we can see what the flower looks like much smaller. So that's what I'm doing here, and then I'm going to cut into it so we can see. And I'm trimming off the ends. There we go. Amazing! I hope you loved these sunflowers, Jen. They were fun. And see, these petals to the right here on the smaller one kind of moved a little bit, which is okay because when you put these little canes, or yeah, the cane slices on something, you can kind of move them like I'm doing here with my fingers. They'll move a little bit, you know, if you want them to go straighter or if they curved a little bit when you were cutting. I also didn't let my cane sit before cutting, which could cause distortion as well. So yeah, that big flower and the small flower